We're not declaring war. War was declared on Mother Earth a long time ago with corporate greed. So what we're really doing is defending her. So it is a war because there's always two sides to a war. So we're defending our mother.
Shannon and Ambrose go to war. Those were some of the enviro radicals that we were telling you about last week. The ones that say they're considering violence if the Northern Gateway pipeline goes ahead. I talked about this on the program, wrote my Friday column about it, and there's been plenty of viewer feedback on the issue, including this from Jim Foster, who said, "No more soft approach on these radicals. The public is tired of these types of people." Bonnie Friend wrote, "Won't be long before some freak tries exactly what they're talking about in the Georgia Strait. Get real jobs, people, and contribute positively to society instead of promoting violence." We had Lynn Wheeler as well. We don't hate Canada. We just hate what people like you and the Conservatives are doing to our beloved country. And we aren't radical terrorists. We're protectors. Finally, Anthony Miller wrote, "Thank God radical environmentalists are looking after us. I'm just a mere industrial real estate agent, so I'm guilty of non-action." Quite the reaction. But Paige McPherson was there for the real reaction. Paige, you were in the office early. That was, what, 6 o'clock in the morning Vancouver time last Friday when Shannon and Ambrose showed up. And after doing their interview with Alex Pearson, you chatted with them. They drummed and did all kinds of other crazy stuff. Fill us in on what happened in the office.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting morning. I definitely wanted to speak with Shannon and Ambrose after this Georgia Strait article came out with this very controversial cover, which really has been a big topic of discussion here in Vancouver.
Pipeline wrapped in explosives, right? It's a pipeline in explosives.
And a hand with a match leading to the dynamite. So definitely something a little controversial. I wanted to get their take on it and also just ask about, you know, is this kind of talk of violence actually productive for you and your movement as a protester? Now, interestingly enough, they did mention that they were not, excuse me, protesters, but actually protectors, which is something that I guess one of those commenters said. But when they came in to the studio to do an interview with Alex Pearson in the morning, they had two of their, I guess, fellow activists with them. They proceeded to drum outside very loudly, doing, I think, what was some kind of a First Nations prayer at 6:30 in the morning when it was still dark outside. So, you know, apologies from Sun News to everybody who was sleeping at that time. But then eventually I let their friends in because, of course, it was cold outside. Basically said, look, there are people working here, so just don't drum inside, and then it's perfectly fine if you come in. Well, when I opened the door to all four of the activists, what I had experienced was they blew burnt sage or burning sage into the studio, which I now understand is a native cleansing ritual. But throughout their time here in the studio, they also, without me really noticing, sprinkled sage all over the reception area, including in our plants at the reception area. They put sage on the receptionist's
these
computer.
are some of the photos for people watching at home. This is unbelievable.
Yeah, a feather left on her desk, and I'll mention it's not like her desk is really out in the open. They would have had to go in and around to sprinkle the sage and put feathers there, so I guess they sort of welcomed themselves to doing that. It was definitely an interesting experience.
But what was their reaction when you talked to them about the issue of violence and the fact that they're advocating something that most Canadians, whether they are environmentalists or not, would find abhorrent?
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask them about, you know, does this help your movement? But also, is this really what you want to do? A lot of people find it unbelievable and would call it eco-terrorism to suggest that, you know, violence really is the answer when you're talking about protecting Mother Earth. So when I interviewed them, and you'll notice their two colleagues are in the background, here's what they had to say.
Basically throwing any kind of roadblock that we can. That's what we mean by a war. I mean, it's not only going to be guns and like whatever.
We are all coming only from a place of light and love and protection. We do not work out of anger ever.
But what I'm asking, war began a long time ago at Contact.
Even when we do see acts of cop cars burning and stuff like that, do you think that it helps your cause? That's my question.
I don't know if it helps the cause, but if at least it gets people talking.
Okay, so they said the war began at Contact. That would mean when Europeans first arrived here. They're saying that you know, they only come from love, but they're not ruling out stuff beyond guns. That's pretty unbelievable. That's not where most Canadians are, though, is it, Paige?
No, absolutely not. I mean, this is something that when you expand upon it, you talk about, for example, the violence that we saw in New Brunswick, the fact that there were weapons there was a cop car that was burnt. This is stuff that really doesn't resonate with people, and I know that some people in Canada think that, well, maybe on the left coast here in Vancouver, people might be sympathetic to these ideas, but actually when I hit the streets and talk to people here, that certainly wasn't the case. So here's a little bit of what people on the streets of Vancouver had to say.
This is an opinion of the Georgia Strait and the pipeline, and that's one-sided opinion of what they believe. I don't think violence is going to solve anything.
The cover invites conversation, and that's the purpose of current events.
I certainly wouldn't advocate blowing anything up, but I like the cover.
If they were to literally blow up the pipeline, it would cause just as much damage as what the pipeline would cause itself.
People get passionate about what they believe in, but I don't feel like violence is the answer.
All right, Paige, what did you get the sense that they were serious, or are they, because some people said, oh, these are just jokers, don't worry about it, they're not actually going to cause violence. What was the feeling you got from having them in the office?
Well, certainly they put on quite a show, I would say. When they were leaving the office, even though they had come inside under the understanding that they would not be banging their drums, they made a big spectacle, banged their drums, and screamed a lot before they left, definitely wanting to make a point and not really perhaps be serious or respectful about things. Whether they're serious about actually acts of violence is something altogether I really can't say. I know that Ambrose Williams, excuse me, he was one of the people that was in New Brunswick when it all happened, when that violence happened, and I asked him about that violence, and he said, look, this was just a reaction to what the police were doing, and even defended some of the weapons that were found on site there. So
I've heard protesters say that after I watched them throw the first rock, the first tear gas canister, everything. It is unfortunately standard protest rhetoric. Paige, thanks for dropping by. Thanks for being there, drums and all.